Hey guys, thanks for joining us. We're here for the fourth out of our 5 webinars. Also great to have you here of an evening. I know that there's lots to pass up in an evening to join us for something like this, so thank you for being here. Hope you've got a cup of, I don't know, lemon barley cordial there with you to enjoy the session. So guys, I'm not going to spend long here with you. My name's Griffin Longley. I'm the CEO of Nature Play. Going to pass you on very soon to our presenters. I just want to say a couple of words about the topic that we have tonight. So we're looking at a couple of things, but one of them is the ways that digital technology can be brought into the kind of outdoor learning that we've been talking about over the course of these sessions. And I just wanted to make the point that I think it's really important that we don't get too binary about these things, that we don't sort of put nature and outdoor time and learning and play on one side and technology entirely on the other. I think it's important to remember that people can be multiple things at once. You know, some of the great nature lovers in the world are also great lovers of technology, and our children are living in a very digital and connected world, and finding ways to bring the two things together sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, and allow technology to be that tool and that bridge, particularly for our kids, who some of whom have very digital and very sedentary lives. It can actually be a really powerful tool, and I think finding ways to do that is really important, not letting it overrun the nature experience, and not only ever having nature experiences with technology is also really important. But today you're going to hear some really interesting stuff, but I just wanted to start you off with that thought that let's try and not push these things, in opposite corners. Let's let our kids be complex and many things at once. And technology and nature can absolutely sit together. They can also sit apart, and they should have that opportunity too. So with that, I'm going to pass you on to the session. I'm going to introduce you now to my wonderful colleague, Denise Ansing, the Playful Education Officer here at Nature Play. So had a fantastic session. I'll be speaking to you at the end briefly as well. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Griff. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our 4th webinar in our series about outdoor play and learning. I'd like to introduce the outdoor education consultants who'll be talking with today. That's Daniel Burton and Trudy Bennett. Hi.
Hello, everybody.
Thanks for joining us today. So we're looking forward to this 4th webinar because next Thursday it's Outdoor Classroom Day on November the 5th. And we'd love you to plan some outdoor experiences for that day, but we'd also love you to join the outdoor classroom movement. So with that in mind, today we're introducing you to the dimensions of outdoor learning. And as Griff said, we're going to be also discussing some of the ways digital technologies can enhance that. So the outdoor education, the outdoor dimensions of outdoor learning are from the Australian curriculum, and that's what we'll be looking at today. So I'll just pop those up for everybody to have a look at. A moment. Apologies. So, number 1, skills and knowledge. Number 2, human-nature relationships. Number 3, conservation and sustainability. Number 4, health and well-being. So there are 4 dimensions of outdoor learning from the Australian curriculum. So today, everybody, we're going to be inviting you to answer a poll, and the question is going to be, which one of those 4 dimensions is your favourite? So as you listen today, just try and reflect on the dimensions and what they mean to you, and the poll question will be, which one do you see as most important? We'd also love you to contribute to our question and answer session, because we're going to have Trudy and Daniel asking any questions that you'd like answered in that session after our first conversation. So please contribute those as well. Our second conversation is about the potential of digital technologies and outdoor play and learning experiences. So you'll probably have questions for that as well, for that conversation. If you haven't explored the outdoor learning resources on the Australian curriculum yet, it's well worth a look. The reference can be found on the downloadable resource for this webinar. So after the webinar, you'll be able to access that. And it provides a framework to promote the sustainable use of natural environments and for students to experience integrated learning experiences across the curriculum. This resource explores the unique benefits of outdoor learning, including links to useful research, and there are curriculum connections for all the year levels from pre-primary up to year 10. Of course, the Early Years Learning Framework also promotes outdoor learning spaces. As you probably recognise this quote, everyone, it's as features of our Australian learning environments, which offer a vast array of possibilities not available indoors. That's on page 15. It's one of the 8 practices, and it's a really, really important one to keep in mind in your planning. So with that introduction, we'll ask Trudy the first question. And Trudy, would you like to give our viewers some information about the rationale of the dimensions of outdoor learning?
Well, I really love that this has been put into the Australian curriculum, because what this signifies to me is that the Australian government thinks it's really, really important for our students to do some learning outside. And that's really great news that ACARA has added this into the Australian curriculum. And so what they see is that all learning areas can be taught outdoors in different ways. And the 4 dimensions are like some of the 4 different ways you can tackle this. So if you're feeling a little bit lost about how to start with an outdoor classroom, you can keep these dimensions in mind and think, oh, what can I do for health and wellbeing? Or what can I do for sustainability? What can I do to enhance skills and knowledge, and take it from that angle. So the reason why this is in the Australian curriculum is because it's acknowledged that learning outside creates positive relationships, not only just with the natural environment, but also with each other. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later on, and also for the individual's own well-being. So the more that we can do our learning in an outdoor environment instead of an indoor environment, we're automatically having this extra benefit of increasing social, environmental, and your own self of well-being. And so the other benefit is that the general capabilities can also be integrated in outdoor learning so easily, and we'll touch on some of these as we go through tonight.
Thanks, Trudy. That's exactly right. The general capabilities of critical and creative thinking, ethical understanding, sustainability can particularly obviously be addressed. But Daniel, as we've spoken quite a bit across this series about the benefits of social and emotional development with outdoor play and learning, I wonder if you could just touch on how personal and social capabilities are developed.
Absolutely, Denise. I think when we take learning outdoors, in fact, when we take any experience outdoors, we have the opportunity for children and adults alike to develop their own autonomy. Nature gives us a wonderful opportunity to explore how capable we can be individually and as a team. And so whether it's a play opportunity or a learning opportunity, and the argument would be that any play opportunity has learning opportunities built into it, but if it's a specific planned lesson with specific academic outcomes, when we take that learning outdoors, we actually start to develop opportunities for communication, to be stronger in a wider space. We have opportunity for teamwork to happen there in different ways, especially if the learning that we're supporting is a physical activity as well. Teamwork is a really important part of that. And then leadership is one aspect that comes up a lot. And teachers see a different side of their children, those children who struggle a little bit in indoor classrooms, often, as we've talked about over the 4 webinars, thrive and shine as leaders in the outdoors. So they have an opportunity to kind of step up and show their skills in an outdoor environment. And I think simply taking learning outdoors highlights the value of the outdoors, builds connections that are then lifelong connections that the children can see as opportunities to enjoy as their life goes on and as adults. We have a very sedentary lifestyle in our society at the moment, as Griff was talking about in his introduction. And by taking learning outdoors, we're just providing another opportunity for children to see the benefits of the outdoors and how amazing outdoors can be.
That's right. Thanks, Daniel, for that one. The first dimension, Trudy, is skills and knowledge. What's your understanding of that first dimension?
Well, often when we're talking about skills and knowledge from a classroom sense, we're thinking about books, websites, information to be told and shared in a very oral fashion. And the dimensions of outdoor learning in this area means that we can have a very practical, hands-on approach to learning new skills and new knowledge. And this is done by exploration, discussion, adventure, all these great, wonderful things outside in nature together. So one of the first great things to do when you're setting up an outdoor classroom is to look at the knowledge on how to be safe in the outdoor space. Particularly these days, we find that there's a lot of children, particularly in the lower primary ages and even younger, that have fear of nature, and they want to know how to be safe. And so if you work with the students on creating ways to be safe together outside, it's a way that you can learn together in the outdoors. So that's a kind of an orienting thing to get to know how to be safe in nature. The second thing is like how to move in nature. I mean, a lot of children haven't developed their gross motor skills yet. So these physical skills on how to move our bodies is something that can't exactly be taught necessarily, but needs to be experienced and practiced on uneven ground, balancing on logs, climbing trees, crawling under things, all these great skills. It's a very hands-on thing. And so this can be done together with a teacher or in small groups or on your own, just a really wonderful thing. The other thing is personal health and preparation. So one of the really important things is transitioning to an outdoor classroom and making sure students know what they need to do to be prepared. So in summer, this is put on some more sunscreen, put your hat on, grab your drink bottle. And once you know all these routines, then that makes things a lot easier. And as Daniel was saying, this is lifelong learning. So we're in an Australian climate. We all need to know how to be healthy in that environment. And that's a skill and knowledge about our environment too. And then lastly, I want to talk about place-based education. This is knowing who lives with us in that space. What plants are we sharing this space with? What animals are we sharing this space with? What do we know about the weather and how the weather changes what happens to these plants and animals and ourselves too? And so when we do this kind of talking, discussing, exploring, we're using critical thinking. And when we want to challenge these things, we're using creative thinking. And when we need to come up with solutions, we're using creative thinking. And so that links in that critical and creative thinking general capability as well.
Thank you. That's a really expanded understanding of that first dimension. Thanks, Trudy, because you're orienting us to the importance of these dimensions. Daniel, could you explain how children's experience in natural environments can enhance the second dimension, which is human nature connections or relationships?
Absolutely. And I think the first step here is to remember that we are nature. So often we talk about human and nature connection, but humans are a part of nature. We are nature. So it's actually about connection to ourselves. And I think when we're talking about the human nature connection, we're also talking about going to a space more than just once. So outdoor learning, outdoor classrooms, and outdoor play is about repeating our visits to a space, becoming comfortable with that space, getting to know that space, and therefore getting to know us in a more, our own selves in a more deeper way.
Thank you. Trudy, I'm just going to jump to the third dimension of outdoor learning, which is conservation and sustainability. How can children's experience in nature support the understanding of conservation and sustainability? Or maybe, Daniel, you wanted to speak to that.
Well,
Yeah.
I was going to follow on from what you were saying about repeated visits. And through repeated visits, you see the change of nature and that seasonality. You also see the change that we have as an impact on nature. And so if you're taking a class to one spot quite regularly, you eventually see things like, maybe a bit of erosion and trampling, maybe the way that we interact with plants, snapping off leaves, or if you've got a fear of bugs or squashing it. These all become teachable moments where you can jump in as an adult mentor, as your educator role, and just highlight, oh, why have you done that? Why does that tree need that leaf? What's the purpose for this leaf on this tree? Oh, look at how this part of this area has changed since the time we've been here. and what is our impact on the environment. So it needs to start with that love for environment and then how we're personally impacting it before we can talk about some of these abstract things that are happening away from our vision and our life.
That's right. And that brings us to the fourth dimension, which is health and well-being, which we always tend to come back to in these webinars, the importance of outdoor learning and play for health and well-being of the students. So what experiences can you share of observing how outdoor learning promotes personal growth and development in the students?
I think the main area here that's a really important part of outdoor learning, outdoor classrooms, outdoor play is resilience building. Trudy spoke about before the need to be prepared for heat and also in the winter, prepared for being cold. When we embrace being outdoors in lots of different seasons, we build resilience to those elements and we get used to being in the environment in different ways. So we develop our physical capabilities, our social capabilities. Emotionally, we're more ready and resilient, and we talk about the idea about grit. Being on the ground, being dirty, having sticks maybe in our shoes or taking our shoes off and having to walk on rough surfaces. All of these experiences are testing us as human beings and developing our resilience and the, I guess our ability to cope with when things don't quite go and experience adversity and also just go with the flow.
I'd like to add there, it's also about nature's healing impact on us and then reflecting how does that change our emotions? How does that give us that sense of grit and that patience to push through and that perseverance? What does being in nature do to us physically, mentally, and emotionally? And being able to reflect on that's really important for lifelong learning.
That's a really quick overview for our viewers of the dimensions. We've got time for questions, so we can delve into each one a little bit more closely, but we're going to have the questions now. If you've got questions, everybody, please send them in to us. We've just given you the shortest overview of each of the dimensions. We'd love you to ask your questions and just find out a little bit more about what is of interest to you. So first question from Seema. She's saying that she faces a lot of challenges as an early childhood educator regarding the risk assessment forms. And this is a topic we've talked about in other webinars, and it's a really important one. People need to weigh up the risk and benefit analysis and provide the right documentation for their settings. So can you just answer that one for us?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd love to chat about that. And I think from the question, it's sounding like the struggle is having to do the paperwork. And I hope I've got that interpretation correct. That's a comment we hear a lot from educators, is that to take children into an outdoor setting, there is a lot of extra paperwork in regards to risk assessments or benefit risk analysis. My piece of advice there would be, so we call them dynamic benefit risk assessments because they're forever changing. However, you can start with a base risk assessment or a base benefit risk analysis. And if you've got multiple classes, multiple groups, share that load and develop, say for a particular space in the school that's going to be the outdoor classroom, develop one risk assessment that covers a whole lot of the elements of the hazards and the risks and also the benefits of going into that space. And then have that as a resource that's utilised term after term, year after year, and for different age groups. And then what it's about is it's about coming back to that resource with the students as a teaching team each term or each year and refreshing it, but then also keeping that benefit risk assessment as a dynamic process in your mind when you're in that space. Because a risk assessment is not just a document you write and then you file away. It needs to be something that informs your observations, and I guess is a chance for you to go through it and check, okay, what things do I need to be aware of in this space? We talk often about supporting children to develop their awareness in the outdoors. The benefit risk assessment helps us as educators develop our awareness. So, okay, I'm going to be looking at branches that maybe getting weak, or after a storm, maybe hazards and they may be falling off, or there's something I need to get an arborist in to check. I'm looking at the lower canopy and what else is around at that level. I'm looking at the ground for trip hazards, for sharp things, and then build that into your practice so that it becomes a part of the everyday practice rather than an onerous process that has to be done before being able to tackle outdoor learning. I hope that answers that question.
I think so. And I think it leads into Ben's question, which is how involved should the children be in that planning process?
Oh, I'd say I'm totally involved. The more involved you can get them, even at a young age, so even if they're 3, get them involved, because then they will take on responsibility for safety as well. And I think what I notice a lot about students these days and children of all ages is that they've put aside their own safety. So they don't take on their own safety as their own responsibility, and they defer that to an adult. And so they're so reliant on adults telling them how to be safe, that they're not making those judgments for themselves. And so through doing a risk assessment with a group of students, and then as Daniel says, it's not just doing the paperwork and it's done, but it becomes a habit forming thing that you do each time you're out there, then that will help them take on that responsibility to be the carer of their safety and not rely on an adult to do it for them.
Judith's got a really interesting question with a different perspective. She said, have you got some ideas for tasks to do with the staff to encourage them to build their interest in being outside so they feel more interested and I guess motivated to take their class outside?
Wow, what a great question. I think that's my favorite of our questions in the webinar so far. I would say it's about experience for ourselves. So we talk a lot about taking children into the outdoors, but let's take the staff. Could you have your regular staff meetings outdoors under a tree? Can you have particular PD that you're focused on as a staff in an outdoor space? Can you have some of your regular planning meetings in the outdoor classroom? And here's a big one. Can you make time as a staff, as adults, to go and play?
Yeah.
Without the kids there? Because often as the adults in the space working with the children, we're doing the observing, we're teachers as researchers, we're keeping an eye out for those risk assessments, but we often miss out on that opportunity to play. So build in time for your staff as adults to get out and play together.
Yeah, have a game of hide and seek.
And hope that some staff don't just run off home, hide in the car and drive away. Jackie's asking you, can you recommend an appropriate time frame for outdoor sessions?
Oh, do you think she means a length or time of year or time of day?
I'd say a length. I mean, with the outdoor classroom movement, we're hoping for all through the year. So let's go with the length of time.
I would say minimum 1 hour, because you've got to take in mind the preparation it takes, make sure everyone knows the toilet and they've got all their hats and gear ready, and then you move and then you resettle, and it takes generally 20 minutes to resettle and get used to the change in the environment, and then you've got to transition back again. So often when we have an hour sessions, it feels way too short, and then you feel like you're dragging the kids back away. And so 2-hour session would be much better. So I'd start with a block if you're in a primary school. So it's, morning tea time, or it's morning tea time to lunch, or it's lunch to afternoon time. So start with 1 block. And then when you get used to that, make it 2 blocks, and then have a whole day of the 3 blocks. And you could do that, say, once a year for outdoor classroom day. You could do it once a term as a celebration. And then when you get really confident, try and do that once a week. Imagine having a whole day a week outside.
You've actually answered Simon's question there. He's saying, how often should you aim to use the outdoor space? So I think you actually answered that. And the key is to be regular, isn't it? To go out regularly so that it's not too novel for the children, that they become familiar with the routines and expectations and, the little things that happen when they go outside.
Like Daniel said before, it's that developing that nature connection by being out there regularly, and you'll find it's the children's favourite time of the week. So make it at least weekly.
Suzanne says, though, what about the summer months when it's really hot?
Do you want to take this one?
So we live in Australia. Heat is a part of our natural environment. It's about being aware of the heat and also supporting the students in the time outside in the heat to get used to heat and what they can do themselves to make sure that they stay safe. Obviously, if it's a heat wave and there's been like 3 or 4 days above 40 degrees, maybe have a think about your outdoor lesson and whether you can do it in the morning rather than in the heat of the day. But I don't think we live here in Perth especially, and I know there's people joining us from lots of different places on this webinar, but here in Perth, we're really fortunate that there's not really any bad weather. I love the saying that is from Danish schools actually, there's no such thing as bad weather, just inappropriate clothing. So if children can be in the cold at minus 30 degrees, I think we're okay being in the heat. Having hats that you dunk in water or neck scarves that you dunk in water to cool you down, making sure there's water around, use water as a part of your exploration and session as well. Yeah, I would say there's not really a time of the year that's too hot.
I agree. And with that, we'll go to the poll question. So I hope you've been thinking, everybody, about your favourite dimension. I'll ask Nicole to pop that up. Thanks, Nicole. So which of these dimensions do you see then as the most important? The skills and knowledge that children develop, the human nature relationships, the conservation and sustainability aspect, or the health and well-being? So just thinking about what you've heard so far, which one would you rate as the most important? Just click on your choice when you've made it, and then we will have a look at the results right at the end of the webinar. And don't be concerned if you find that a difficult question, because I actually think it is. Okay, now we're going to explore how digital technologies can potentially enhance outdoor learning. Screen time and green time are not mutually exclusive. So how can we utilise the technology that's available to us? Digital technology can sometimes be effective to add interest and stimulate creativity, especially as it can be quite interactive and support students collaborating with their peers. Children are motivated by having fun and being outside, being social. And so we're now going to have a talk about how we can enhance that aspect of learning. And again, we encourage you to put your questions into the chat so we can answer those in the question and answer session a little bit later on. Trudy, digital technology enables children to collect their nature discoveries by not only taking photos to share with each other, but by utilising other applications. What can you tell us about using a digital journal to keep a record? And this one's linking to Dimension 1, skills and knowledge.
So I find that when I discover something amazing in nature as an adult, I always get my phone out and I take a photo and I pop it on Facebook or Instagram because I'm so excited about it. I want to share it. And I think that's what technology as a tool does for us now. It's a really easy way to capture that joy and excitement of discovering something new and sharing it. And nature journaling is a little bit like that. It's about capturing what you're discovering in nature. And you're able to timestamp it and you can date it with technology as well. And then you can use that to track over different seasons and different years what's happening in this space. And so it's a great tool for this. And so, yeah, so not only just photos, but it's also soundscapes. We can record sounds as well. We can use other applications to look closer, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. We can pull photos together to make a pictorial collage or put it in a comic or another kind of document template layout that's there where we can add text and things as well to explain it. We can take video, we can make TV shows. There's all these different things that we can do. And this is an area where we see children's leadership come out. So we're talking about when we go from an indoor classroom to an outdoor classroom, we see leadership in the outdoor classroom from often some very different children. And same with technology, you might find that there's some leaders in technology that then can like be the ones that are the recording artists for the group in the group work situation.
That's right. When children are playing outside regularly and hopefully on a daily basis, they start to develop a strong connection to place. How can teachers incorporate digital technology, Daniel, to strengthen Dimension 2 human-nature relationships?
I think I'll say the same comment that I said before to this one, that we are nature. So I guess it's about how we can identify our own position in nature and as nature. And then in that sense, linked to our senses. We have more than just 5 senses, but if we look to those 5 senses alone, how can we use technology to capture the things that we see, the things that we hear, the things that we smell, the things that we taste, and the things that we can touch and texture? And I think looking at ways that we can look deeper and closer at the detail in these natural environments is a way that we can do that. So using cameras that we can zoom in on, or magnifying glasses, microscopes that connect to our devices is a way that we can bring the technology out with us, and then capture that to bring the experiences and the captured sensory experiences back into a classroom with us through nature journaling, like Trudy was talking about, or even just as an opportunity to capture things that move in different ways. So we can look at them for longer rather than capturing that thing and taking that animal or insect back in the classroom. We can capture an image of it and take it back that way.
I think the big advantage of the digital technology, isn't it, that it gives us time to go back and have a look at what we've seen. It might have just been a glimpse, or it might have been very tiny, but by using the magnifiers and the camera aspects, we can really enhance our experience and really dwell on it longer and look more closely, as you say. So with that in mind, Trudy, what ideas can you share to use these aspects to support Dimension 3, the conservation and sustainability dimension?
Well, first of all, I think conservation has a lot to do with looking closely, because some of the changes in our environment happen really, really slowly, or it's really small at the start before it becomes like an obvious change. And one thing that we've lost in our human condition is being able to observe things closely, and we often just look past things a lot. And you see this in children's drawings, that when they draw, they'll just draw what they think, not draw what they see. And so if you take a photo of something, you can zoom in with technology and just take a portion of that. And so it's abstracted, it's not the whole picture, and then ask children to draw that. Or attach a microscope. You can get microscope fittings for iPads and things now. And then if you take a closer look at something, then that is also abstracted. So when you come and draw that, it is, again, something that you can't just draw, you have to look closely at it. So it's training to look closely. The other thing that I love is it's about small change. And so you're looking at small changes. Then also it's about value. So even something like sand, if you look at sand in a microscope, it is so magical. And then you can compare different types of sands as well. And this is how we can fall in love with nature. It's by having a look at some of these magical, beautiful things that you can see when you're looking really, really closely.
That's a great answer. And I love the idea of looking so closely at something like sand, isn't it? It's always much more revealing than you expect when you first glance at it. So Daniel, how do you use, or have you seen other teachers use digital technology to enhance the Dimension 4 health and wellbeing?
I think there's a lot of access to resources that are to do with weather and the actual natural environment that we're going into. Simply like a weather app, or one of the Bureau of Meteorology apps that looks at the rain radar. So exploring those apps, those resources and those digital tools to talk with and discuss what the weather's doing with our students before we take them outside, or as we take them outside. When we're talking about being in the heat and being in rain and cold, well, can we actually look at how hot it is in our area? Can we look at how much rain is forecast, how much rain we've collected, and utilize that data that's really accessible through digital technologies to make a real close connection with the environment that we're in. And then also we can use the nature that we're in, the environment that we're in, as backdrops and settings. So say, for example, you're doing a class, dramatic representation, a play, a performance that requires a natural background. Well, instead of painting that indoors or putting a screen up, you could actually take that play outdoors, take the performance into a natural space, or take photos of the natural environment and then manipulate those and place them on a big on a projector, and that then becomes the backdrop for your play. Creating soundscapes, so going out into your natural environment, using sound recording apps to capture the sounds, and then bringing those back to create soundscapes to go with performance, with presentations, with explorations and projects like that.
Thanks, Daniel. And Trudy, to finish off, would you like to share some information on that about Nature Play WA's Nature Passport app? That's a free to download app. And how have you seen that used, Daniel? Trudy, sorry.
So this is a great new resource by Nature Play in Islandwood in America, and it's got some different functions. And one function is the nature journal that we're talking about, so that you can take photos of the things that you see, write some notes in about it, even take some sound capturing, and then that's stored there. And the app's great because you can set up your class in groups, so you can create teams that can remain consistent and be saved on your devices across the school, and then they can be shared as well, which is really lovely. And then there's some activities, and the activities range from different crafts, games, sort of like awareness, observation activities, and that kind of thing. And as a teacher, you can firstly observe how the children interact with nature and what they're interested in, and then go into the app and say, okay, well, what connects with what they're interested in? Are they interested in bugs maybe? And then, okay, let's look at all the things that are about bugs, and you can bookmark them. And then this is then a line of inquiry. So some primary schools I know set up activities where the children do independent work, and they've got to progress through different activities at an independent rate or as a group. So you can set up these bookmarks so that you can give the iPad or tablet to a group of students and say, I've bookmarked all the activities, make your way through all these activities at your own rate. And then you come back together as a whole class and you can share what people have captured. And it's been really clever the way that the app's developed, because these activities, you have the instructions, and they're really clearly outlined instructions in the app, but then it also asks the students to capture something of what they've done, so a video or an audio clipping, or they've got to do an activity on the iPad itself, and so they've got something that they can share at the end too.
Thank you, Trudy. So in effect, everybody, digital technology can be integrated into meaningful nature experiences and used for learning, communicating, creativity, reflection, and we've got a lot more ideas on our downloadable resource, so you can have a look at that as well, and there are a lot of links to useful apps that you might like to use with your own students. So we'll go now to the questions again, and the first one is, how do you stop technology getting in the way of the outdoor experience? That's from Suzanne. So how do you, did you get that one?
Yeah. I think, one thing that children like to do with something new is to play with it. And even if it's something that they're familiar with, they like to play with it first. And so sometimes you need to allow a little bit of time just to play. I remember in when Daniel and my class, we were doing capturing using iMovie, and they were playing with the different trailers and what trailers they were going to use. And so play is learning. And so it's learning and experimenting with what the app is going to do, but then there's a limit. And so, okay, we've got to now change focus and do something else. So it's about providing time for that play, but then setting a limit. Okay, now this is when you need to start capturing and recording your work. I like the way that the Nature Passport app has been designed to get children to look up. So all the instructions about looking up and connecting, or looking back down past the iPad and connecting. So it's about using it as a tool to go out and grab something. So whatever you do when you choose a technology to bring out, make sure that it is a tool. And then if it's used inappropriately, then it gets taken away as part of a natural consequence.
Exactly. Julie is asking about digital technology that you can use with early childhood students. Do you have a favourite?
Digital technologies outside, so similar apps that we're talking about, but then I would ask about the question about what is technology and then what is the digital technology. So it could be a microphone, it could be an old style camera, it could be a light source as well, like a torch. So are there, in the early childhood settings, are there cubby houses and structures that they're creating that can create darkness? And then if you take a torch in, that's a technology that they can be using to create shadows and lots of different ideas. I think now, like they could have light shadows, they could have a performance, they could be doing lots of different things with those torches. So I guess having a look at what the definition of technology is and then finding technologies that work in that space. Yeah.
I think for the digital technology for early childhood students, those camera apps and magnifying apps that you were talking about are really appropriate because they allow you to be really fascinated by the world. Just the example that you gave, Trudy, where you can really, really look closely. You know, that's a very simple app to use, and yet it's just endless in its possibilities of what you can be studying when you're outside. Mel's asking you, do you include a reflection time outside or back in class? So when would you reflect on your learning?
I would always say yes, definitely do a reflection time. This often gets missed, and it's really important to leave time for reflection. Often we can get carried away and miss this out totally, but this is where we can really pull together all the learning and share the learning with each other. And that sharing of learning helps things grow. So that's really important. If you can do it outside, that is great because then there's the context visually present there. And so if the reflection involves pointing at something in a place, then that's really important. If you run out of time to do it in the outdoor classroom, though, I'd say doing it back indoors is better than not doing it at all, and that's important, grounding. Another reason why you might do it indoors is at the start of an indoor extension of what you're doing outside. So there might be something that you prefer to do indoors than outdoors in terms of you might be researching or writing something down or doing something more focused, and then having like a pre-briefing, like a reflection that comes before an activity. Remember when we were here, then that's an important place to do that.
I think logistically, one process or one practice that I've been using with the classes I've been working with recently is to come back into the classroom, and each of the children have an iPad that they have access to, and they actually record themselves interviewing themselves, and then they place it on Seesaw. So the questions that I give them are, what did you do today? What did you learn? And what would you like to do next? As 3 reflective questions. And the reason we do that back inside is because A, they have access to the iPads there, and also it's a little bit quieter. So if you're in an outdoor space that has maybe a road nearby, or there's other people in that space, sound can be a bit of an issue if you're trying to get good quality voice recordings of those reflections.
Yeah, and you've touched on that really important aspect of being able to share. So the technology enables you to collect thoughts and voices in a really authentic way. And as you say, share that with families, share that with peers, other people in the other classes. So that's something that we couldn't do before, but now we can. Digital technology has given us that ability to capture these moments. Tom's asking you about the older children, the middle childhood students. How do you use digital technology with them? Have you got some favourite projects maybe that you can recall?
So I've just done a project with a group of year 3s, and previously I've done a similar project with a group of year 5s, where we've been exploring Swan River Colony, and we've acted out the scenes that they've been exploring. And then we've used digital technology to actually record as a video and then piece together in iMovie a film of their recollection, well, not a recollection, but their representation, of the Swan River settlement. And then they've pieced that together using iPads and iMovie as a form of digital technology. And it's been really great to be outdoors and see the play come into outlining and demonstrating how deep their understanding goes from the content. And then for them to be able to share that, record that, and present that to their peers and also to their parents as well. It's an opportunity for their parents to see how important outdoor learning is and the benefits that they get from being outdoors and learning outdoors.
I love iMovie as well, and particularly the animation function with older students. It helps them really zone into detail when they do an animation. So with an animation, you get them to do a storyboard first. They have to consider all these different details in a logical sequence. And then when they have their first go, they see how clunky the animation is and how it doesn't quite flow together because there's details that have been missed. And so for older students, it helps them slow down, focus on details, and just do things step by step. So that's another thing that you can do either as an indoor classroom, but also with natural materials outside.
Sandra's started with a comment here, worried that children are viewing the natural world through cameras too much. My struggle is to get them to focus without needing to share. So I guess, yeah, if you could just speak to that.
I think that comes back to, so like Griffin was talking about at the start, it's about balance. And it's not about one replacing the other. It's about having a balance between the two. And we've done, this is our 4th webinar. 3 of the webinars have been about the importance of utilising outdoor spaces, outdoor learning, outdoor play. And this 4th one is that bookend to find ways that we can bring technology into that space. So I would say if you're feeling like your students are having a lot of time observing nature through a lens, then have more time and build more time into opportunities where they're not. So then, yeah, that's about building that balance into your own particular scenario in your own context.
Yes, and maybe the class would benefit from that time in nature, just thinking about how to develop the observational skills, to learn how to look with the eyes first and look closely, maybe even with magnifying glasses in the first instance, just to develop the skill of being in nature, activating those senses.
And I'd like to add just a comment about educator modelling here as well. Often I know with particularly the early childhood educators, they need to do like learning journals quite regularly and have photos of every single child doing every single amazing activity that your class does. And what that means is that when you're being an educator, you've got your iPad or your phone or your camera in front of you all the time, taking photos of every single thing and every single person. And that becomes a barrier to your relationship with your students and enjoying nature with them. So I'd make sure that you have some time where you don't feel like you need to record digitally as well, and that you can just be there and present with your students.
Thank you. I think we'll find out the results of the poll now. I'll ask Nicole to share what everybody thought. So remembering that the question was, which of those dimensions did you see as the most important? Oh, it's almost a tie, isn't it? We've got health and well-being on top at 43%, and then human nature relationships, which is a great one as well, 38%. And so skills and knowledge, conservation and sustainability at 10% each coming together there as well. It's really important, isn't it, that health and well-being is at the forefront of our mind with our students. Thanks for participating, everybody. That's great to hear what you thought there.
Thanks for your great questions, everyone. That was really wonderful.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everybody for participating in today's webinar. Thank you for your understanding of the dimensions of outdoor learning, Daniel and Trudy, and how to incorporate technology in meaningful ways, which is the important part. It's been really thought-provoking. Thank you.
You're welcome, Denise. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Just to remind everybody that you can access our recordings and downloadable resources and references on the Nature Play website. Our previous webinars were called Providing Outdoor Learning and Play Opportunities for Children, Observing the 7 Ways that Children Play Outside. Last week we had Resourcing Effective Outdoor Play and Learning with Loose Parts. So they're all on Nature Play website. You can easily access those. Next week, we've got the day before Outdoor Classroom Day on Wednesday, the 4th of November at 7:30 p.m. We've got Griffin Longley with our final webinar. It's designed for parents, but will of course be appropriate for all of you educators as well. And Griffin will be sharing his ideas about creating unforgettable memories with families. And we'd love you to join us there. Make sure you complete the survey, everybody, to get the certificate for your professional learning today. And thank you for joining us. Back to you, Griff.
Thanks, Denise. Guys, I'd like to just say a quick thank you to our fantastic consultants and Denise. I think you can really feel these guys' passion and commitment for outdoor learning. And I think for me personally, watching it, it's really inspiring, listening to what they have to say, but more than anything, feeling that deep commitment that they have. So I hope you've picked up on that, and I hope you've caught a bit of that passion. I'm sure you already had some of it yourselves. The thing I always end these sessions with, guys, is just a reminder that this idea of using your audience with children that you have through being an educator to promote and give opportunities for play it's sacred work. It's so important, and it's sharing that core human inheritance of time and space to play, to make stuff up and to make stuff ups. You know, that opportunity to make errors and to work through them and to invent as a part of that, as a response to that. It is so fundamental to creativity, to social and emotional intelligence, to resilience, to so many parts of what make a fulfilling life. So please keep at it. Keep your eye on us, on our work. We're here to share ideas and inspiration wherever we can. You'll be getting an email very shortly in the next couple of days. It'll have links to the resource and to the video of today's webinar. You'll also have the survey. Reminder that at the end of the survey, there'll be a link to your certificate. Guys, if that email doesn't come through, just to remind you again, look in your clutter or in your spam folders. Because we're sending it to a lot of people at the same time, it sometimes gets caught up in the security. So just have a look there. And I look forward to having you all come and join us for the final webinar. Just on that final webinar, I'm going to be talking about the big picture behind all of this, what's happening in the world that leads us to this strange spot where we have to focus so much on outdoor learning and play for our children to have a healthy and happy childhood. And I'm going to be talking about why our parents need to get behind this movement and really support you in your work. So I hope you can join me. Please encourage your parent body to join us, and best of luck out there.